So, I've been listening to How to Make Friends and Influence People. And good book, very good book. I actually think I abide by already and embody most of the principles in the book, which, considering I have a lot of friends, shout out to my friends, it would make sense. Because a lot of the book is about putting others before yourself, being, polite, deferential, remembering people's names, all those kind of things. And I do that. I do it pretty well, actually. I do think the book was written for people who already had a certain amount of power, however. I don't think it was written with the peasant in mind. That's why I will pretty much always prefer the No More Mr. Nice Guy book and the Free Agent Lifestyle book as far as the self-help genre is concerned, because a lot of the principles in the How to Win Friends and Influence People, they are written for somebody who is looked up to already, somebody who has a certain amount of respect or authority already. Now, it's written for people who are a little bit feared. When they walk in a room, people pretend to be busy. When I walk in a room, nobody fucking notices, first of all. And even if they do notice, they A, don't care, or B, are, my friend. I do not strike fear into the hearts of my fellow man. So, I think that's why I think the book is written for people who have authority and are respected, and more so than people who are peons. Okay, so for example, when I was trying to get fuel reimbursements back from my company, I was extremely patient, I was extremely polite, I was persistent, but I always was very deferential, hey, you guys owe me this much money. When you have time, can you please pay me back? Pathetic, I know, but that's how I faced that problem as a guy that's probably too nice. And at the end of the day, they bald-facedly shorted me just because they could, basically. And that's why I think the No More Mr. Nice Guy book is better for me than the How to Make Friends and Influence People. And it's okay. I'm still going to finish the book and apply the principles in it. Like I said, I am already embodying most of the things that the book is talking about. And I have a ton of friends to show for it. So it works, and it's a good book, but I don't think it's the book that I need. So back to my fuel repayment debacle example. One of the principles the book talks about is admitting that you could be wrong or that you have been wrong and things like that. Now, when we were debating over the amount that I was to be repaid, I mentioned several times that it's very possible that I could have the number wrong, but that that the number I had was a certain amount, and the number that they had was a lot less. Now, and like I said, I was taking the very polite, like, hey, thank you for taking care of this. I realize that, you guys are really busy, but this is the number that I got, and I realize it's a lot higher than the number that you got. And now I think, like I said, going back to the power factor, if I had been the one in a superior position, in a more powerful position, these words would have been taken very seriously. I could have thrown in there that I was a goddamn math teacher at one point, but I didn't want to brag. Now, like I said, the power differential. Okay, so if I had been coming from a place of power, my words, I believe, would have been taken a lot more seriously. However, coming from you're just a low-level truck driver, who the hell are you to tell me that my math is not correct? That's the more of the way that it was looked at, I think. Because, like I said, power differential is we're hierarchical animals, and the social hierarchy is just a really big deal with us. And for someone like me, who is on the super low end of the hierarchy, socially, at work, just in every way, shape, and form, if I wasn't deferential and polite, I would just get told to go fuck myself, basically, as I basically was in the situation with my job. Like, that's why, like, going back, I think the book was written. Now, kindness does always catch more flies than being a dickhead. If you were trying to catch flies. If I was a frog, I'd be fat. But that power differential, because I'm such a low status person, me being polite and deferential and knowing somebody's name and admitting that I could be wrong is a given. People automatically assume that I'm just wrong because of who I am. So, I don't know. It's a good book, like I said, but I don't think it's for me. I don't think it was written with peasants like me in mind. Maybe someday, when I'm a king. Not to spend this whole video bitching about work, but here I go. So, the other thing that just popped into my mind about, being polite and kind and the power differential, and how that doesn't matter if there's a power differential and you're on the bottom end of it. So, my last pay stub, once again, I think they fucked up the math. Surprise, surprise. Like I said, math is kind of my thing. Now, I'm not saying that I can't make a mistake, because I could be wrong about absolutely everything. However, when they put on my pay stub that I got 14 hours of sick time, and we work 10-hour days, and I was gone sick for 2 days, I start to ask questions. Like 14 doesn't even make sense if I was gone for 2 8-hour days, much less 2 10-hour days. See what I mean? Now, I raised this concern and was told that yes, that is concerning. There were other discrepancies on there, such as I had worked a 15-hour day, which should be a few hours of double time, and yet I didn't have any double time listed on my pay stub. So, yeah, the sick time was a concern, but it was one of a few concerns that I had about that particular pay stub. So I was told, yes, this is, there's something to be looked into here. Cool. That was sometime well into last week. Midway through, or towards the end of last week, I texted again. Hey, you guys find anything out yet about my weird pay stub? Got the message back, oh, we're working on it, which is what they always say. We're working on it. That's basically the death sentence for any sort of information request. Now, they couldn't even tell me for sure about even the rate of double time. So, at this point, I had several questions. However, I was very polite and patient and deferential, and, I know you're busy, sir, but this is my question. So, and then again, I asked on a couple days ago, this week, and that time there was no reply at all to my message. So, I don't know. I don't know if being a dickhead is going to work either. But being polite and, sandwiching questions between compliments and things like that is not really working either. Once again, I think it's because I'm a peasant. I am last on their list of things to do. They've got important things to do, I'm sure. And I hate it because it does not help my self-esteem any. And I also hate it because my fear in continuing to push the issue is that at some point, I know there's something wrong. But at some point, I fear that they're just going to tell me to fuck off. And kind of like they did with my fuel reimbursements. And I'm going to have to either fuck off or, look for a new job. Which, as I've said before, this is the best job I've ever had, and I love it. But, man, maybe, like I said, someday when I'm the king and I've got the power, maybe these principles will work. But coming from the peasant's perspective, playing that I could be wrong and could you just look into this for me and being polite it's not getting the wheels spinning.